Berlin, November 1943. A British SOE agent named Michael Thornton sat in a crowded Gestapo waiting room, holding forged identity papers that identified him as a Swiss businessman. German security had stopped him at a railway checkpoint, suspicious of his travel documents. Now he waited while officers verified his papers, knowing that any moment they might discover his true identity and execute him as a spy. In his jacket pocket was his only weapon, what appeared to be an ordinary mechanical pencil, the type businessmen across Europe carried daily for taking notes and signing documents. The pencil looked completely authentic, the right weight, the right feel, even functional mechanisms that advanced and retracted a graphite lead tip. But hidden inside the pencil's brass casing was a 3-inch spike of hardened steel, needle-sharp and capable of inflicting lethal wounds to the throat, eye, or heart. The pencil unscrewed at the center, separating into 2 pieces that revealed the concealed stiletto. In Thornton's trained hands, this innocent-looking writing instrument could become a killing tool in under 2 seconds. A Gestapo officer approached, papers in hand, expression unreadable. "Herr Weber, your documents require further verification." Thornton stood, calculating distances and angles. His hand moved naturally to his pocket, fingers closing around the pencil. If this went wrong, he had perhaps 3 seconds to draw the weapon, strike the officer's throat, and attempt escape through the crowded building. The officer led him to an office, gestured to a chair, picked up a telephone. Thornton sat, pencil now held casually in his hand like any businessman might hold a writing instrument, thumb positioned over the separation point, ready to unscrew and draw in one fluid motion if the officer's expression changed from bureaucratic boredom to recognition and alarm. 20 minutes later, Thornton walked out of Gestapo headquarters, papers approved, identity confirmed as legitimate. The pencil remained in his pocket, undrawn but ready. He'd carried a lethal weapon into the heart of German counterintelligence, been searched twice, and walked free because no guard imagined an ordinary pencil could be deadly. This is the story of the pencil dagger, and how MI9 engineers turned the most mundane office supply into a weapon that saved agents' lives across occupied Europe. Let's go back to 1941.
MI9, British Military Intelligence's escape and evasion organization, faced a persistent challenge: how to arm agents and evaders operating in occupied territories where possession of weapons meant immediate execution. Guns were obviously contraband. Conventional knives raised suspicions. Even the Fairburn Sykes fighting knife, despite its effectiveness, was identifiably a weapon that no civilian would carry. What agents needed was a weapon so perfectly disguised that German security would examine it, handle it, even use it themselves without recognizing its lethal potential. Christopher Clayton Hutton, MI9's chief gadget designer, understood that the best concealment wasn't invisibility. It was hiding the deadly inside the ordinary, making weapons look like objects Germans expected civilians to carry. The mechanical pencil was perfect. In 1940s Europe, mechanical pencils were common business and professional equipment, carried by clerks, engineers, accountants, journalists, and businessmen. A man traveling with a mechanical pencil aroused zero suspicion. German security officers themselves carried mechanical pencils. The object was so mundane it was essentially invisible. But could you actually hide a functional weapon inside something as small as a pencil? The engineering challenge was extreme. A mechanical pencil measured approximately 13 centimeters long and barely 8 millimeters in diameter, tiny dimensions for concealing a blade long enough to reach vital organs and strong enough to penetrate clothing and flesh. Station 9 engineers, working with precision metalworkers, created what became officially designated as the pencil knife, but was universally called the pencil dagger by agents who carried them. The device had to be completely functional as a pencil. If German security tested it by writing, it had to work. Simultaneously, it had to contain a blade capable of inflicting immediately incapacitating wounds. And critically, it had to look, feel, and function identically to genuine mechanical pencils that Germans examined daily. Creating a functional pencil that concealed a lethal blade required solving mechanical and metallurgical challenges that pushed 1940s manufacturing capabilities. Every component had to serve dual purposes, appearing as pencil parts while actually being weapon components.
The exterior casing was precision-machined brass tube, identical in dimensions and finish to commercial mechanical pencils manufactured by European companies. The casing was 13 centimeters long and 8 millimeters in diameter, standard pencil proportions that felt natural in the hand. The brass was polished to the same finish as genuine pencils, with subtle wear patterns added to make it look used rather than suspiciously new. The pencil mechanism was completely functional. The top section contained a push button that advanced and retracted a genuine graphite lead through mechanical action. The lead holder, spring mechanism, and advancement system all worked exactly as in real pencils. Agents could actually write with the device, demonstrating functionality if German guards tested it during searches. The concealed blade was the engineering triumph. A spike of hardened tool steel, approximately 7 centimeters long and 3 millimeters in diameter, honed to needle sharpness. The blade was thin enough to fit inside the pencil casing while leaving room for the functional pencil mechanisms above it. The steel was carefully heat-treated for maximum hardness and edge retention, soft enough not to shatter on impact, hard enough to penetrate bone if necessary. The separation point was machined to appear as a decorative ring around the pencil's center. The joint used precision threading that allows smooth separation while maintaining tight tolerances that prevented rattling or movement that might betray the concealment. The threads were cut to specific depths that required exact rotation to separate. Casual handling wouldn't accidentally unscrew the pencil and reveal the blade. The blade mounting secured the stiletto inside the lower casing section. A precision-fitted collar gripped the blade base, holding it firmly aligned with the casing axis. This alignment was critical. Any wobble or deviation meant the blade wouldn't track true when thrust, potentially glancing off ribs or bone rather than penetrating. The weight distribution was carefully calculated to match genuine mechanical pencils. The brass casing, blade, and mechanisms were precisely balanced so the complete assembly felt natural when held. Too light and it felt hollow, too heavy and it seemed suspicious. German guards who handled thousands of pencils would notice weight anomalies even subconsciously.
The clip mechanism was fully functional. The spring-loaded clip attached the pencil to jacket pockets or document folders exactly like genuine pencils. The clip had to work reliably because agents needed to wear the weapon naturally, accessing it habitually without fumbling when seconds mattered. Manufacturing required skilled machinists working to tolerances measured in hundreds of millimeters. Each pencil dagger was essentially custom-built. Mass production wasn't feasible with the precision acquired. Production quantities were limited, with each unit hand-fitted, tested, and inspected before being issued to agents in the field. Quality control included functional testing of both pencil mechanisms and blade deployment. Inspectors verified that the pencil wrote smoothly, that the separation point unscrewed cleanly under combat stress, and that the blade aligned properly when drawn. Units failing any test were rejected and destroyed rather than risk agent lives with substandard equipment. Carrying a pencil dagger meant nothing without training in its rapid deployment and effective use. MI9 developed specific instruction for agents receiving these weapons, emphasizing speed, surprise, and targeting. The drawing technique was practiced until it became muscle memory. Agents learned to grip the pencil naturally, appearing to reach for it to write or gesturing with it during conversation, then explosively unscrew the two sections and thrust the exposed blade in one continuous motion. The complete sequence from concealed to striking took under 2 seconds with proper training. The grip positioned fingers on the upper casing while the thumb applied rotational pressure to separate the sections. The motion combined rotation with linear pull, unscrewing while drawing apart. The technique required practice because fumbling the separation meant losing the weapon's surprise advantage and potentially alerting targets before the blade to be deployed. Targeting emphasized vulnerable areas accessible with a short blade. The throat was the primary target. The carotid artery and jugular vein were close to the surface, protected only by skin. A thrust to the throat caused rapid blood loss and immediate loss of consciousness. Victims couldn't call for help because the blade damaged structures required for speech. The eye socket offered another high-value target. The blade could penetrate through the eye directly into the brain, causing instant incapacitation.
This required precise aim, but was devastating when achieved. The technique was taught for situations where the agent faced the target and throat access was difficult. The heart could be reached by an upward thrust under the ribs, though this required more force than throat or eye strikes due to the blade's short length and the need to penetrate between ribs. This was considered a secondary technique, used when other targets were inaccessible or the agent had surprise advantage, allowing a more deliberate strike. The psychological training emphasized that the pencil dagger was a last resort weapon for desperate situations. Agents were taught to avoid combat whenever possible, but if confrontation was inevitable, if cover was blown, if capture was imminent, the pencil provided one final option to fight free or kill key opponents before being overwhelmed.
Scenario training put agents in realistic situations. Gestapo interrogations where the pencil rested on a table within reach. Checkpoint inspections where agents had seconds to respond to exposure. Close quarters encounters in trains or safe houses where firearms would be impractical. Instructors attacked unexpectedly, forcing students to deploy the weapon under stress and surprise. Maintenance training covered blade care and mechanism maintenance. The steel blade could rust if moisture entered the casing, requiring periodic disassembly for cleaning and oiling. The pencil mechanism needed occasional adjustment to maintain functionality. Agents learned basic maintenance procedures to keep the weapon reliable across months of operational deployment. Pencil daggers saw limited but significant use throughout World War II, primarily by SOE agents operating under deep cover in occupied territories. Documentation is sparse. Successful use meant killing witnesses, and unsuccessful use meant capture and likely death before reports could be filed. Documented cases exist primarily from post-war debriefings and German records. One SOE agent operating in France, identity still classified, used a pencil dagger to kill a Gestapo informer who'd identified several resistance members. The assassination occurred in a crowded cafe during daytime. The agent engaged the target in conversation, drew the pencil as if to take notes, and thrust it into the man's throat under the table. The target collapsed, the agent departed amid the confusion, and the pencil was recovered by resistance members who recognized its significance.
An agent operating in Holland used a pencil dagger during a Gestapo interrogation. His cover story was breaking down under questioning, and arrest was imminent. When the interrogator turned to check documents, the agent unscrewed the pencil he'd been allowed to keep, lunged across the desk, and struck the officer's throat. He escaped through a window during the alarm confusion, though he was later recaptured at a checkpoint and executed without revealing the weapon's nature. German security documents occasionally reference concealed stabbing weapons resembling writing instruments found during searches or autopsies. These cryptic descriptions suggest other pencil dagger uses that weren't documented by Allied sources but were observed by German investigators. The descriptions are vague because German analysts often didn't understand they were looking at manufactured weapons rather than improvised tools. The psychological value extended beyond actual combat use. Agents carrying pencil daggers reported feeling less helpless during dangerous missions. Knowing they had some weapon, even if used as a last resort, provided psychological comfort that improved operational performance. The weapon served as much as morale booster as practical tool. Many agents never drew it in combat, but valued having the option. The concealment was remarkably effective. Multiple documented cases exist of agents being thoroughly searched, including having their pencils examined, without German guards recognizing the weapons. The disguise was so complete that guards sometimes borrowed agents' pencils to write, wittingly handling enemy weapons while conducting security procedures. The pencil dagger's limitations shaped its operational role. The short blade meant agents had to be extremely close to targets, within arm's reach, making surprise critical. Struggles or fights against multiple opponents were nearly impossible to win with such a small weapon. The pencil was for single, decisive strikes in situations where the agent had surprise advantage and escape route planned. The pencil dagger, despite clever design, had significant limitations that prevented it from being a universal solution to agent protection. Understanding these constraints provides realistic assessment of its capabilities and risks. The blade was extremely short, only 7 centimeters, limiting targeting options and requiring precise strikes to vital areas.
Thrusts that missed major blood vessels or critical structures might wound without incapacitating, allowing targets to raise alarms or fight back. The margin for error was tiny compared to longer weapons that could cause incapacitating damage even with imprecise strikes. The structural fragility was inherent in the design. The blade was thin to fit inside the pencil casing, making it vulnerable to bending or breaking if it struck bone at wrong angles. Several recovered pencil daggers show bent or broken blade tips, evidence of failed attacks where the weapon was damaged during use. A broken blade left the agent effectively disarmed in hostile territory. The separation mechanism could fail under stress. If threads became corroded from moisture infiltration, if the agent's hands were injured or numb from cold, if the mechanism was damaged during rough handling, the pencil wouldn't unscrew cleanly. Several training accidents occurred when students fumbled the separation under stress, losing critical seconds that would have meant death in actual combat. The disguise, while excellent, wasn't perfect. Experienced Gestapo officers who'd seen multiple concealed weapons sometimes felt pencils carefully, checking for unusual weight distribution or separation points. Some security procedures included attempting to write with suspect pencils to verify they function normally. Agents whose pencil mechanisms had degraded from poor maintenance occasionally faced exposure when pencils failed these tests. German countermeasures evolved as they captured examples. By 1944, Gestapo security bulletins warned about pencil knives and instructed guards to examine mechanical pencils more carefully during searches. The bulletins included descriptions of separation points and advised attempting to unscrew pencils to check for concealed blades. This increased scrutiny reduced the weapon's effectiveness in the war's final year. The psychological burden of carrying a lethal weapon disguised as an innocent object affected some agents negatively. The constant awareness that they possessed a concealed weapon, the paranoia about accidental exposure, the mental rehearsal of deployment scenarios, this created stress that some agents found more debilitating than helpful. The psychological cost of readiness sometimes outweighed the practical benefit of being armed. The limited combat utility meant the pencil dagger couldn't substitute for proper weapons in actual fighting.
Agents who got into extended combat against multiple armed opponents found the pencil hopelessly inadequate. It was an assassination tool for specific scenarios, not a general-purpose fighting weapon that provided meaningful protection against organized opposition. The pencil dagger influenced post-war development of concealed weapons, though modern examples differ significantly in materials and design. The principle of hiding deadly capability inside innocent objects persisted through the Cold War and beyond. Intelligence agencies worldwide developed their own concealed blade weapons after World War II. CIA technical services created pens, markers, and other writing instruments that concealed small blades or poison delivery systems. KGB Technical Directorate manufactured similar devices for their operatives. The specific designs remain largely classified, but declassified documents confirm that concealed blade weapons remained operational tools for decades. Modern materials enable more sophisticated concealment than 1940s technology allowed. Ceramic or polymer blades can defeat metal detectors that would identify steel weapons. Carbon fiber construction allows stronger blades in smaller spaces. Modern adhesives and manufacturing precision create joints so seamless that separation points are nearly invisible even under close examination. However, modern security screening technology makes concealed blade weapons less practical than during World War II. X-ray scanners reveal internal structures regardless of external disguise. Advanced search procedures include examining innocent objects more thoroughly than 1940s guards could manage. The arms race between concealment and detection has generally favored detection in high-security environments. Some law enforcement agencies use disguised batons or striking tools that follow similar concealment principles, appearing as innocent objects until deployed for defensive purposes. These are typically non-lethal compared to concealed blades, reflecting modern legal and ethical standards that differ from wartime assassination missions. Collectors highly value original Mi-9 pencil daggers, though surviving examples are extremely rare. Most were either lost during operations, destroyed when compromised, or retained by agents who kept them as personal mementos. The few that reach public markets command significant prices due to historical significance and scarcity. Museums rarely display pencil daggers, despite their historical importance, primarily because so few survived, and because intelligence services remain reluctant to publicize specific concealment techniques. The Imperial War Museum holds examples in restricted collections, occasionally displayed in special exhibitions on intelligence operations. The pencil dagger represented the ultimate concealment, a lethal weapon hidden inside an object so ordinary that enemies examined it, handled it, even used it without recognizing its deadly potential. The engineering achievement was remarkable, the concept brilliant, and the operational application limited but significant. For agents operating under deep cover and occupied territories, the pencil dagger was insurance against the worst-case scenario. It meant that even if discovered, searched, and disarmed of obvious weapons, they retained one final option to fight for freedom or die trying. That option mattered psychologically as much as practically. Knowing you weren't completely helpless changed how agents operated under stress. The weapon succeeded because it exploited human psychology. Guards expected weapons to look like weapons: guns, knives, clubs. A mechanical pencil was so mundane, so obviously a writing instrument, that the human brain categorized it as harmless without conscious thought. That cognitive blind spot created the concealment that engineering alone couldn't achieve. German security eventually learned about pencil daggers, but knowledge didn't eliminate vulnerability. Even knowing concealed blade weapons existed, guards couldn't examine every pencil with suspicious thoroughness without paralyzing administrative functions. The mathematics of security worked against them. Millions of legitimate pencils versus dozens of weapon pencils meant false positives would overwhelm true positives. So why was this deadly British pencil dagger carried in plain sight? Because MI9 engineers created perfect mechanical disguise. Because the blade was thin enough to hide inside a functional writing instrument. Because agents trained to deploy the weapon in seconds when exposure was imminent. Because guards who searched agents, who examined their possessions, who tested their documents, never imagined an ordinary pencil could thrust a steel spike through their throats. The pencil dagger killed rarely, but mattered enormously. It gave agents hope, provided last resort capability, and demonstrated that British ingenuity could create weapons that looked like anything except weapons. And in doing so, it proved that sometimes the deadliest weapons are the ones enemies never recognize as threats until the blade enters their flesh. The Germans searched for guns, confiscated knives, detected explosives, but they never stopped British agents from carrying pencils, because pencils were just pencils, harmless office supplies, tools for writing rather than killing, until the moment they became weapons, and by then, it was too late to stop the strike. That's the perfect disguise, not invisibility, but appearing so innocent that no one questions your presence, even while you're being searched for weapons. And that's why the pencil dagger worked, because it was deadly precisely because it looked so harmless. From pencil daggers to pipe knives to time fuses, World War II weapons reveals how British intelligence turned everyday objects into life-saving weapons. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of innovation that gave agents fighting chances against overwhelming odds.